Moving on to video number 2. This video is about using formulas to interpret data. And so the first thing we're going to be able to do is find the distance between any 2 points in a given plane. This distance formula is given to you on your formula sheet. So in your course package and on the Moodle site, there's a file that you can click and it brings up this. So these are any of the things that if you were writing tests in person, these are the things that I don't expect you to have memorized. And it's totally legit to have this with you when you're writing quizzes or writing tests. So you'll notice for chapters 1 and 2, I've given you the distance formula, the midpoint formula, and the difference quotient, and some base graphs. And then it goes chapter 3, some stuff, chapter 5, some stuff, and so on. So this is something that's really handy to have with you when you're working through the course. So back to the distance formula itself, you don't have to have this memorized. You don't have to understand where it comes from, but I think it's kind of good to know that what they've done is they've said, hey, if you've got any 2 points, x1, y1, and x2, y2, and you wanted to find the distance between these 2 points, we could create a right triangle out of those 2 points. And we could say that the length of this leg is the difference in the x values. The length of this leg is the difference in the y values. So if we think of Pythagorean theorem, d squared equals this side squared plus this side squared, right? So x2 minus x1 all squared plus y2 minus y1 all squared. And then to get d by itself, we just take the square root. So you're just going to be using this formula to find the distance between pairs of points. You are going to be expected to give an exact answer unless otherwise specified, and I'll explain what that means when we get to an answer. And then sometimes they'll say, where appropriate, an approximate answer to 3 decimal places. So let's just start off. Whenever I'm using a formula, I like to write it out. So distance equals the square root of the distance between the x values squared plus the distance between the y values squared. Now here it's very specific, x2 minus x1, y2 minus y1. Well, which one's x2 and which one's x1? It doesn't matter. You just take your 2 points. And let's say that this guy is x1, y1, just because it's written first. Let's say that this guy's x2 and y2, because it's written second. All right, so if we do it that way, I'm going to plug in for x2, 5. I'm going to plug in for x1, 11. So 5 minus 11 all squared. Then we're going to do the y's. So y2 is negative 4. My 4's always looking like 9s. There we go. Minus my y1, which is negative 2, all squared. And then we simplify. So if I do this, I get 5 minus 11 is negative 6. Negative 6 squared is 36. Here I've got negative 4 plus 2, so negative 2 squared is 4. All right, 36 plus 4 is 40. Now we can talk about giving an exact answer and where appropriate an approximate answer to 3 decimal places. If I just wanted an approximate answer to 3 decimal places, I would literally just plug this into my calculator right now. So I'm going to type in the square root of 40. If I plug that into 3 decimal places, I get 6.325 because it was 3245. So since the number next to the 4 is a 5, that's going to make it round up to the 5. So this is my approximate answer. It's approximate because I rounded. I haven't given the full solution. If I want an exact answer, so let's just put this is approximate. If I want my exact solution, well, square root of 40 is my exact solution. So what's wrong with that? Why can't I just say that my exact solution is the square root of 40? Well, it's not simplified. So it's expected that you are familiar with simplifying radicals. What I mean by that is there a perfect square that divides evenly into 40? So I'm going to break 40 up into the product of 2 perfect squares, or sorry, product of 2 radicals, and I'm going to look at 40. So 40 can be 1 times 40, 2 times 20, 4 times 10. I go, because 4 is a perfect square. So I'm going to break 40 up into a product of radicals where one of them I can take a square root of. So the square root of 4 is 2, and I'm left with 2 times the square root of 10. This is the exact solution, and it's in simplified form. We always want to simplify, right? We never want to give an answer like 6/8 when I could say that that's 3/4, right? Mathematicians never want answers that are not simplified. So if you want an exact solution, give it in simplified form. If it's approximate, you're allowed to touch your calculator, and you would round to whatever decimal places they ask you to. Looking at most of the questions in your assignment, you're not usually given a radical that needs to be simplified, but that is something that's expected in this course. So the more times I mention it and teach it to you, maybe you'll come and get help, or you will kind of know what I'm talking about. All right, so here's the next one. The next one is we have the point -2,5 on a circle that has 3, -1 as its center. Find the approximate length of the diameter of the circle. So this entails a little bit of knowledge about circle geometry. So if we say the point -2,5 is on the circle, we'd say, okay, this is -2,5, and I don't need it to be exact. And that there's a point 3, -1 at its center. And I want to find the diameter. Well, if I find the distance between these 2 points, I'm going to get the radius. And then I want to see if you know how to then find the diameter. So what I'm going to say is pause the video, find the length of the radius, and if you're up to it, then tell me the length of the diameter. Okay, so pause the video now. So hopefully you listened and you're coming back and we're going to go through it together. So I guess that was the first time I've asked you to pause the video. All right, so the distance, we're going to, again, write down the literal formula. And then we're going to plug in our points. And again, it doesn't matter which one's x2 and which one's x1, right? So let's call this one, oh, I don't know, x2 this time, because it's the point on the circle. And let's call the center x1, y1. Maybe I'm doing this differently than you, and what you're going to notice is it doesn't matter the order because you're just finding the distance between them, and then it's getting squared. So it doesn't matter whether you get a negative answer or a positive answer, which is the only difference between which one you put first, because it gets squared. So for me, I'm going to go -2 minus 3 all squared plus 5 minus 1 all squared. So instead of putting minus -1, I often just go minus and make a plus out of it. And now I'm going to simplify. So -2 minus 3 is -5 squared is 25. 5 plus 1 is 6 squared is 36. 25 plus 36, I feel like I can do, but I make so many mistakes in videos because I don't just plug it in. But I get square root of 61. Okay. So this is the distance, not diameter. This is the distance between these 2 points, which is my radius. But I want the diameter. The diameter is just 2 times the radius. So if my radius is root 61, then my diameter would be 2 times root 61. Now this question said to find the approximate length of the diameter to 1 decimal place. I'm going to plug it into my calculator. I'm going to type 2 times the square root of 61, and I get approximately 15.6. All right, moving on. The next skill is midpoint. So again, this is another formula that you will find on your formula sheets. You're not expected to have this memorized, but it's good to know what it's doing. So this formula says that the midpoint is equal to, you find the average of the x values. So when you add 2 things together and divide by 2, you're finding the average. And then we find the average of the y values, and that gives us our midpoint. So again, we're going to start by writing out that little formula. The more times you write it, the more times you might memorize it. So x1 plus x2 divided by 2, comma, y1 plus y2 divided by 2. Now let's put in the values. Again, it doesn't matter which one's x1 and which one's x2. Let's do this one as x1, this one is y1. Let's do this one as x2, and this one is y2. So I'm going to add these together. I get -4 plus 2 all divided by 2. And then the y values, I've got -2 plus 5 all divided by 2. This first point is going to be -2 over 2, and then the y value is going to be 3 over 2. Simplify where possible. So -2 divided by 2 is -1, and then I'll keep that as 3/2. Now, rule of thumb, a lot of people ask me at this point, well, could I give 1.5 as an answer? Sure, Totally okay if an answer is like 1.5 or 1.6 or 1.23. But if you get something like 1.6 repeating, put it as a fraction. If you get an irrational number, meaning a decimal that's non-terminating and non-repeating, write it in exact form. Okay, so if something's like 3/2 and it gives you a 1.5, it doesn't matter to me. But be comfortable with the fact that 3/2 is 1.5. That's important. All right, go try those 5 quick check questions and then come back and start 1.2.